So without that grounding, all we have is subjective expressions of personal taste. What is right for you is not right for me. What is moral for you might not be moral for me. For example, when I say, I think that chocolate ice cream is the best ice cream, I am saying something true because it reflects my subjective appreciation of that thing, which is the ice cream. So we have a subject and an object. Now notice that I don't say anything outside of me. The ice cream does not taste, I taste. Similarly, when we see actions in the outside world, outside of ourselves, when we make those moral judgments, all they are subjective expressions. There's nothing objectively true about them. So in that case, if all we have is subjectivism and possibly relativism, what that means is that we can't condemn. Because to condemn means that you have an objective framework, an objective grounding to condemn someone. How can you have a moral high ground if everything is on the same plane? It doesn't work that way. That means that we can't condemn the likes of Hitler, we can't condemn oppression, we can't condemn crime without that foundation.
Now, I have presented a positive case for grounding an objective morality in the context of science. And thinking about moral truth in the context of science should only pose a problem for you if you imagine that a science of morality has to be absolutely self-justifying in a way that no science ever could be. Okay, every branch of science must rely on certain axiomatic assumptions, okay, certain core values. And a science of morality would be on the same footing as a science of medicine or physics or chemistry. You need only assume that the worst possible misery for everyone is bad and worth avoiding, and indeed the worst case scenario for conscious life. And if science is unscientific, if having a value assumption at the core renders science unscientific, what is scientific? Now, Dr. Craig is confused about what it means to speak with scientific objectivity about the human condition. He says things like, from the point of view of science, we're just constellations of atoms and we're no more valuable than rats or insects. Okay, as though the only scientifically objective thing that could be said about us is that we're constellations of atoms. Okay, there are two very different senses in which we use these terms subjective and objective. Okay, the first is epistemological. It relates to how we know. And when we say we're reasoning or thinking objectively in this sense, we're talking about the style in which we're thinking. We're talking about the fact that we're seeing through our biases, which is to say, trying to jettison bias. We are reasoning in a way that's available to the data. Our minds are open to counter-arguments. Now, this is the absolute foundation of science, and this is what opens such an invidious gulf between science and religion. The difference here in this approach to objectivity. But science does not require that we ignore the fact that certain facts are subjective, ontologically subjective. Okay, there are facts about the human condition that science can understand and study that are first-person facts, facts about what it's like to be you. Okay, and we can study these facts, and our study of them reveals how much deeper and richer and more meaningful our lives are than the lives of cockroaches. Okay, so this is a false reductionism that he's purveying here. Now, so there are subjective facts. If you happen to have an intact nervous system, being burned alive will be excruciatingly painful. The painfulness of pain is a subjective fact about you. Okay, what my argument entails is that we can speak objectively about a certain class of subjective facts that go by the name of morality, that relate to questions of good and evil, and these depend on the well-being of conscious creatures, especially our own. And by this light, we can see that it's possible to value the wrong things. I mean, if you think you prefer to be neurotic and in pain and incapable of creative work and completely disconnected from other people, there's something wrong with you. Okay? Objectively wrong with you? Yes. Okay? In that you are closed to higher states of consciousness. Higher with respect to what? Higher as in further from the lowest possible state of consciousness, the worst possible misery for everyone. Okay. Is the worst possible misery for everyone really bad? Once again, we have hit philosophical bedrock with the shovel of a stupid question. Your question cuts to the issue of, what if it's all about well-being? Well, why don't we just, kill all the unhappy people in their sleep tonight? Okay, wouldn't that raise sort of the aggregate level of well-being on Earth? And there are infinite number of thought experiments like that you can come up with that seem to push on this concern. Well, if it's just about suffering, well, you can just eradicate it painlessly for people, and you have increased the net well-being. But all of those thought experiments neglect all of the cascading effects of living in a world in which we do that sort of thing, with the consequences of doing that. So why don't we, in the classic experiment that everyone trots out is, what if you're a doctor and you realize that you have somebody who could benefit from the organs of, you have 5 people who could benefit from the organs of one person who's sitting in your waiting room. So you go into your waiting room, you knock him out, and you euthanize him, you vivisect him, and you give away his organs. Okay, that seems like it's a net benefit to 5 people. Okay, but if we were all living in a world where at any moment your doctor could vivisect you and steal your organs, that would have rather obvious, ghastly consequences that none of us would want to submit to. And our intuitions about the sanctity of human life, caring for people, treating people as ends in themselves rather than means to some other end, all of that conserves intuitions we have about trust and its importance in life, and all of these ways in which we are knit together as a community, and ways in which we only rise or fall together. I mean, so it's in a very important sense, our happiness is dependent upon the happiness of others. I mean, we are not atomized selves that are radically separate. So this idea that killing everyone, I mean, first of all, killing everyone would eradicate all the suffering, yes, but it would also foreclose all the happiness. I mean, it would nullify every possibility of experience. So if you think that a universe where the lights are on is better than a universe where the lights are off, then turning the lights off is worse. But I could imagine a universe which it would be worth turning the lights off in. I mean, the Christian hell is one of them. You'd be doing people a lot of good.
So, Dr. Harris, I think that you've posed some interesting challenges to Christianity and to theism in general, but I want to return to the issue of debate, which is the objectivity of morality. And so, you say that you can base objective morality on the assumption that this worst possible world is bad. So I think that we can all agree on that statement, that it is bad, but what's to say that that's not simply just a subjective assertion, that it's just something based on human opinion? I don't see any reason to think that that's an objective.
Right. Well, I tried to show you in my opening remarks why that particular concern is not interesting or necessary. You can play that same game with everything that we think is objective. So why does 2 + 2 make 4? How it seems to make 4 to us, but how do we know that's not just a human intuition? I mean, what is wrong with a logical argument that contradicts itself? Why is self-contradiction not a good way to argue? Well, it just doesn't seem to fly. Now, you could always try to get behind that as an epistemological skeptic or a logical skeptic and say, well, this is just how you monkeys are wired to think. And there are interesting ways in which science at its forefront does create some of that tension. There are ways in which our logical expectations begin to break down in physics, but we use other scientific intuitions, and in this case mathematical intuitions, to try to get behind them. You have to pick yourself up by your bootstraps somewhere. Okay? It's better than pulling yourself down by them. And so you have to every objective paradigm has to make a first move. It has to step into the light based on some axiomatic judgment that is not self-justifying. Gödel proved this in logic, and if this is true for arithmetic, it's true for things far more complicated than arithmetic. I'm saying that a recognition that this universe offers a spectrum of experience, on the one hand truly intolerable and on the other sublimely wonderful, and that we all know that movement across this spectrum toward the sublime is better than movement toward the unendurable and pointless suffering. Now, that's, again, you might ask, well, what about suffering that actually turns out to be good in the end? What about the suffering of, the stress of learning to play a musical instrument or whatever? Again, that's not a counter. I mean, there are ways to climb. We might have to go down a little bit to go up to a higher place on this landscape, and that we can make sense of that kind of struggle. And so I'm not equating the good with mere pleasure in a way that Dr. Craig suggested.
Okay, thank you.
Fun here.